And what we're going to start with is the slab accessory. And I'm going to use it on this piece of deck here. So what the point of the Cadimage Coverings tool is to represent your cladding or your finishes realistically in the model, in 3D and also in 2D views. So the idea is that we essentially make or model the elements that you would normally just sort of draw a picture of or paint on, as it were. So in this case with the deck, what you might do to place decking on something like this slab here is you might come in and you might apply, say, this wood deck surface here. And you can see that that gives us something that looks a bit like a deck. But as soon as we cut a section through that, we're going to lose it. We're not going to see any of the gaps between the decking or anything like that. It doesn't really look like a decking. It just sort of gives you a simulation of woodiness, I guess. So that's not really ideal in a lot of cases, although it is nice and fast to do. So if you don't want to go with just using a material, the other thing that you could do, and I'm not going to do it because it will take far too long, would be to use beams or maybe other little slabs to model up each of the decking boards to go across your deck here. This would work as well, the problems being that it would take a very long time to set up and it would be very difficult to keep it in the shape of the deck if you modified the shape of the slab that's underneath there. But it would look good if you cut a section or elevation view, and it'll look good in 3D, obviously. So where the Coverings tool aims to help here is to come in and give you the best of both worlds there. So what we're going to do, the way that you use all of our Coverings tools is you select the element that you want to apply a covering to, go up to the Cadimage menu here, go to Coverings, and then choose the type of covering that you want to apply. So I'm going to choose Slab Coverings here. And you can see there's two slab coverings available. The precast slab covering is for doing, obviously, precast slabs. We like nice self-explanatory names, as you can see there. There's a couple of settings that you can apply for this. So we've got interspan by default, but there's also option for multiple different profiles there. And when you choose each one, you get multiple settings about how you want it to look. And you can see in my 3D preview here that it is reflecting those changes as I make them. But what we really want to look at here is the decking, which is one of the more simple coverings, but it gives you a good effect and kind of hard to reproduce any other way other than using this covering. So let's have a look at that. So you can see we've got the board set out at the top here. And the little diagram shows A, B, and C on here, and those correspond to these three fields. So you can enter the board width, the board thickness, and the gap there. So 90, 35, and 3 at the moment. You can also choose what kind of profile you want to use, reeded or flat. I'll stick with reeded because it looks kind of cool. Choose how many grooves you want, whether you want them to be rounded or square, and then this overwhelming array of parameters here is to set each of these individual parts of the board that you can see here. So A, B, C, D. So you've got all these various settings here that you can set the depths of the reeds and the width of the edges and the spacing between them and all that sort of thing. Lots and lots of control should you want it. If you don't, leave it at the default and you'll get a pretty cool looking deck applied to your slab anyway. So let's go with that, and we've got a nice woodish looking material there. So let's just go ahead and hit OK, and you can see straight away it's applied nice reeded boards all the way across this slab. And if I zoom in on the edge of this here, you can see that it's properly modeled in 3D. So we've got our reading showing across there, the gaps are being shown accurately, and if we were to cut a section through here, we would see the deck exactly as we have specified it in the settings there. So we've got a really nice looking, completely 3D deck here, which was easy to place, and more importantly, it's also easy to update. So if I were to come in here and grab my slab and decide that I want to change the shape, and change the shape of my slab as you would normally, and as you could see as I was modifying that, the deck is automatically modifying itself as we go to fit the shape of that deck, of the slab, sorry. So you don't need to do any extra work if you decide to change the shape of your elements once you're done. So that's the deck covering. Nice and simple, obviously, not much to it, but it gives you a good example of what the coverings tools are supposed to do. It's to make a nice, accurate, realistic looking 3D accessory for your model that minimizes the amount of extra work that you have to do when you're modifying things in your model. So that's the deck, which looks nice and is easy to apply, but let's go with something a little bit more complex by looking at the roof. So with roofs, similar to what we had with the slab, one of the things that you could do is you could come in here and you could apply a roof tile material and get something that looks mostly like tiles on a roof. But again, we have the problem where it's basically just a picture painted on top of our flat roof slabs. So you can see they don't join up in the corners. There's no 3D detail to them. If we were to cut a section, they would look no different than a flat slab on an angle, should I say, flat slab. And there's no sort of gutterings or downpipes or anything like that. So you can get a kind of okay looking thing relatively easily by choosing a material there. Just going to undo that to go back to white. But what we want to do is we want to have a nice 3D object sitting on top of that that looks like an actual roof. So I'm going to again select my roofs that I want to apply it to, go coverings, roof coverings, and that will show us the roof covering object. Now this one has a lot more detail in it than the deck did. So let's go through and have a look at what sort of settings we've got. So at the very top we've got configuration. That lets us set a sort of overall scheme for how the covering will be applied to this shape of roof. Defaults to hip and gable, but we've got a couple of sort of preset styles here, or you can choose custom and just set up the edges to be exactly what you want them to be. I'm going to stick with hip and gable for this one. And the next most important part is the cladding. So at the moment it's set to tiles. We have a couple of different cladding styles though, cladding types that you can use. We've got a nice corrugate, which lets us set the, what would you call them? The sort of, here we go, the height. I was going to say amplitude, but yes, the height of the corrugates. And there's overhang setting there. We can apply a material to them and choose how we want the cut surfaces to look. So if I click on that, you can set the line types and the pens there. We've got flat, which is what it sounds like. It's just a flat surface, which may not seem particularly useful, but it will give you a sort of a second layer to your roof slab, which may be useful. Ribbed, which obviously is a ribbed profile, and it's got some settings in there to set the way you want it to look. Shingles, dimensions and offsets. Spanish tiles with roughly the same settings. Tiles, and do we have anything else in there? No, that's all of them. Great. So I'm going to go with tiles because that's what we were wanting. And let's look through the next settings. So framing is what is going to apply underneath the actual covering. So at the moment we've got an overall control to say whether you want to have framing at all. So you can tick that and it'll take the framing off. You can see it disappeared from my 3D just then. But I'm going to leave them on, and we're going to go with timber framing for this one, but you could also use steel C sections or Z sections. And once you've chosen what kind of framing you want to choose, you can set the size of the framing members and the spacing there. There's also some settings to do with the location where you want them to be placed. You've got a toggle there for if you want the batten to be within the roof or just to go wherever it fits. And then there's appearance settings, so you can set the way that it looks. And so these, of course, once you cut through in section, you won't be able to see them in 3D most of the time, but once you cut a section through your roof, you'll be able to see a nice roof covering with the framing members all stuck in there for you. The next thing is the edge boards. So we've got a few different types. Timber edge boards is what we've got by default here, but there's a couple of metal types there. And then we've got separate settings for the various bits of the edging. So you can either click on these little ellipsis buttons or go down to these various things. Either way will get you there. So if I click on the fascia one, you get a bit more settings here. So the top level just gives me the control of the width, which is probably all you need when you're just roughly placing your coverings, but once you want to set it up to something more specific, click on the ellipsis to drill down to more detail there, and then you get much more settings here. So we've got the width of 190, the thickness, excuse me, and the drop of the board below the line if you want to offset that, and some settings to do with the materials there. And there's a couple of presets there. So we've got a 140 and a 135. The next thing is the barge, which has similar looking settings to the fascia. So you've got it's set to visually match at the moment, but you could set it up to look different. So that's just carried through the settings so it will look the same. And then barge extensions, if you want some of those, you've got settings for the angle and the distance there. And ridge board as well, and again it's copying the settings through from the barge, but you could manually specify those if you wanted to. All right, the next part is the soffits, or soffits. So at the moment they're set to be sloping. Sorry, they're set to be sloping, yes they are. But you can set them to be flat if you wanted, and you can also set how wide you want them to be, the margin that you want, and also the thickness here. And you can also choose how you want the edges to work as well. So we've got raking, but you could box them if you wanted, and again settings for those once you choose them here. Flashings is next. As you can see, there's a lot of detail in here, and you can choose to just gloss over most of this and leave it with the defaults, and it'll give you something decent looking. But we're going to look through all of them for now. So again, this is similar to the edge boards page in that you can set up your settings here and press the ellipsis buttons there if you want to get more detail. So at the moment we've got square tiles set for each. But we've got a couple of presets there. You can see the settings for the barge flashing, that's square tiles, round tiles, rolled square, flat square, or just plain old flat, or none at all. We also got the option for the hip and ridge flashings, which are set to match the barge flashings at the moment, but you could untick that and set those independently if you like. And then the apron flashings have this setting whether you want to model the vertical surface or the horizontal one only. Settings for materials sit over here, but let's have a look down at some more detail on this. So we've got our square tile setting here, and once we've got that chosen, you can see it's dimensioned here, and we can modify any of those dimensions. If you change to something else, you get different settings. So you can see there's plenty of control there to make it look exactly the way you want it to. Let's stick with square tile, and how you want the ends to work. Hip and ridge flashings, as I said before, we're matching the barge flashings at the moment, so that's kind of locked, but we could override that if we wanted. Apron settings here. Again, we've got the options to model the vertical surface or just the horizontal one, and then you can set some settings for those there as well. And the valley flashings, which has just got some custom controls for the dimensions on that. All right, I think we're about halfway through the roof covering now. So we're on to the gutter setting now. At the moment it's set to a half round, but there's a bunch of different options. You could choose a fancy colonial style, you could have square or angled, various different types here. And as soon as you choose the one that you want, you can, again, using this little image and these settings here, you can set whichever dimensions you want to while you're in here. You've also got some settings to do with the downpipes as well. You can't see those yet because we will need to apply them, or not apply them, but make them show once we've applied the covering. So I'll show you that in a few minutes. But you've got a bunch of settings to do with it here. You can set them to be circular or rectangular, and to include brackets if you want to. And then you've got settings about how you want it to be set out. So there's the diameter of the pipe, how far you want it to drop, what angle you want the neck to be, and so on and so on. So you'll need to set these up to fit how you want your downpipes to look. And then we've got attributes, and there's a lot of these, which we'll kind of skim over, but this is the sort of one-stop shop for all of your attributes. So if you've gone through and already modeled up your roof coverings, you can easily come through here and just blow through this and set all of the attributes all in one spot. These are all available and on the various pages that we saw previously, but this is the sort of global materials area. We've also got cut surface settings here, and you can see there's quite a few of them. We've got cut surfaces for the cladding, cut surfaces for the framing, cut surfaces for the edge board, soffit flashings, gutter and downpipes, and they all look roughly the same as you can imagine, and you can set those all individually there. A couple of display options to do with how you want the how detailed you want the model to be, if you want to show the framing in your 3D views, and also if you want to set them to show differently on different stories. All parameters we can ignore. All right, so a lot of stuff in there. Obviously, as I said before, you can pretty much just choose what kind of type you want from here and then click go, and you'll get something that looks pretty decent. But once you do decide that you want to customize it a bit more, there's plenty of room to do so in there. So now we just click OK, same as we did with the decking. Give my computer a minute to do it. There we go. And now we've got some nice tiles on our roof. And you can see that these are 3D. So if we were to cut a section through these, you would see all of the detail. So it's really nice and easy to do, and again, like before with the deck, we can easily modify the shape of these roof planes, and the roof accessories the roof coverings will automatically update with those new shape changes. So that looks pretty good. Let's try it on these roofs here as well. So again, we select the roofs, go to the coverings menu and roof coverings. I'll leave it at the same settings that we had before and just hit OK, which applies coverings to all of those roof planes there, which looks nice. But we've got a bit of a problem here where it joins onto the wall. So to fix that up, we will need to we'll need to just modify the shape of those roofs to add in an extra node. So I'll grab this roof edge here and I'll just draw an extra node in here at where it intersects with the wall. So it's not changing the geometry of the roof at all, it's just adding an extra point in there. And I'll do the same on the other side. Oops. The intersection point. And now if I pop back out to 3D, you'll see that nothing has changed. So what we need to do now is select all of our coverings and go to the Cadimage menu again, coverings, and instead of applying coverings like we have been so far, we want to edit the roof edges. So let's click on that one, and we can see in here we get a sort of a symbolic view of each of the roof accessories the roof coverings that we have selected. And you can see what kind of edges they have on all of them. So you can see these edges that I'm wanting to work on at the moment are set to gable barges at the moment. And if I zoom in a little bit, because we zoomed out a bit far, you can see this edge here is also a gable barge. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this edge here and set it to be an apron, and also this edge here. And if I zoom in again, you can see now this edge that I just set is a gable apron, whereas this one is still a barge, so it's going to look like it currently does, whereas this one's going to change. So that's all our adding of the extra node has effectively done, is it's made it so that we can split that edge into two different edge types. So if I click OK now, you can see it's turned those edges into the kind of ones that I want, but it's preserved the edging past that node that we added. So I'm pretty happy with that now. So, and again, there's lots more that you can do with these. Editing edges works on any of the roof claddings, obviously, not just those ones. It's just that these all happen to be what I wanted. And yeah, so adding nodes to the underlying element will add an extra subdivisions to the edges in the covering. So that's all we did there. All right, the next covering that we want to look at is the wall covering. So let's choose a couple of these walls here. Oops. Excuse me while I fumble my way through here. Right, so we've got our walls selected there. And same as before, hit the Cadimage menu, coverings, and wall coverings this time. And we'll be thrown into our wall covering object. And we've got a big pile of settings again, so let's have a look through those and see what we can do. So the configuration setting, lets us set the overall way for the sort of the system of coverings on this element to be set. So at the moment you can see we've got it set to split at sill height, and you can see in the preview that it's showing two different, well, at least two different colors there. So that's showing the two different parts. We can set it to a single cladding, which means that it'll all be the same. We can split it at various different points, so the sill height, the head height. We could set it to the sill and the head heights. You can set it to do different things around openings, if you like. So we've got split below openings and at sill and at head heights. All sorts of controls here. And then there's also apply separate coverings to all areas if you decide that you just want to go crazy and apply every different covering. You can then go with that one. Let's stick with split at sill height for now though. Over to the side here you can see we've got some settings for the way the top shape and base shape will work. So by default they're set to follow the wall top and the wall base, but we can change those depending on the situation. So you set it to be flat, which allows you to just set an overall height for the wall covering, and it will just be that height all the way across, which may be good if you want to ignore parts of the wall for your covering. Follow wall shape to height does the same as follow wall top shape, only it will cut off at a certain height. And custom top shape will give you essentially a free-form top shape, which you can modify in the section elevation in 3D windows just by using little purple hotspots that it'll put all over it. I'm going to stick with a follow wall top shape for now because it's the most straightforward and the most common. And you can see there's also an A setting here which will let us add an offset if we wanted to have one of those, so you could offset it up or down from the top. The base shape settings are very similar. Flat, follow the wall base, or custom. And there's an offset setting there as well. So you can see these are offset by -150 at the moment, which is what I want to go with. And then we choose the actual covering type. So you can see there's two settings here because we've got two coverings because we chose that configuration. So we've got the main covering and the below sill covering. This would show as many selections as it needed depending on how we had chosen to set it out. And similar to with other tools, we press the little ellipsis button to go down into the settings for that part. So if I click on the main covering setting, you can see at the moment we're using a board and batten setup, and it shows us a little diagram of how that will look, and we've got it keyed with these various dimensions here which can be set over on the side here. So there's all of the bits that you'd want to control for your boards and battens. But we've got a bunch of different types. So generic is just a nice flat one, similar to the flat setting for the roof covering. Bricks and blocks applies what is essentially a flat covering, but it has little cuts through it to make it look like bricks or blocks. Weatherboard setting, which will give us some nice 3D weatherboards. You can see, you may be able to see in the preview at the moment that they're all running vertically because my cladding orientation is set to 90 degrees here, but if I set that to 0, you'll see them looking in a more usual weatherboard layout. Boards and battens, which is what we had before. We've got grooved shiplap settings here, or smooth. Oops, missed one there. Panels setting, so this will essentially do a flat one, but it will cut in grooves at various dimensions, which you can offset using the settings here that you can see. So you can see the width of the notch and where you want them to be offset. Corrugate, which we saw just before, and it's got the same settings as it had for the roof covering. Logs, which is self-explanatory. Vinyl weatherboards, which look very similar to the normal weatherboards. And ribbed, which again looks very similar to the roof covering that we had there and has pretty much the same settings as well for the control of that. So you can set it up to look pretty much however you want. Let's go back to boards and battens though, and I'm going to set them to 90 degrees so that they're running the other way. And you can see we've got some settings over here for the offset. So at the moment they're set to offset from the bottom left corner of the wall, but depending on what kind of cladding you're using, board and batten is not really so much of a board and batten you probably would want to set the offset, but things like bricks and blocks you might want to set what corner you want them to start from and that sort of thing. So you choose your origin point, and then you could offset from it or just set it at 0 so that it starts from the origin point. But there's plenty of places that you can offset it from there. We've got some settings to do with the surfaces here as well. And the material, let's stick with that one. Yep. And settings for the pens while we're there as well. And then below the main covering setting, we have a bunch of settings to do with how we want the blocking, I guess it's called, to work. So we've got the external corner settings here. So at the moment it's set to none, so it's just going to be a corner. But if we wanted to, we could add a rectangular profile here, or various other kinds of profiles, bevels, however you say that word, for if you're using bricks and blocks. Rounded type, or chamfered. And that just lets you choose how you want it to be cut. So that's the external corners. You can do the same with the internal corners. A few less settings here because the other ones don't make any sense beyond the internal. Square ends for your ends of your coverings. So you can see it's applied those there. And join between claddings as well. So we could set up a rectangular profile at the join between cladding types. I'm only using 2 horizontal ones, so you can't see any join at the moment. And then we've got the covering below sill height settings here, and these settings are identical. Sorry, the options for it are identical to what we had for the top part. So these ones we've got set to bricks and blocks, which I'm going to stick with, and I'll just change the material to be something sensible. I say that I'm never going to be able to figure out something sensible, am I? Let's just go with a color. Whoops. And the covering below setting has exactly the same set of corner and end settings here as well. So we could go through and apply those if we wanted as well. All right, horizontal trims is the next up part. So you can see we've got a bunch of settings at the high level here. So wall top, head height, sill height, and wall base. And if we press our ellipsis buttons, we can go down and get the settings for those. So the wall top is set to none at the moment, but we could put a maybe a sill up there if we like, or just a rectangular profile. You can see those in 3D. And there's an offset setting there if we wanted as well. So wall top, head height, which you can see if I apply, there's the head setting there. Sill height, so this has got a sill profile switched on at the moment, which makes sense because we've got our boards and battens at the top and brickwork on the bottom, so we've got a sill profile separating the two. And then wall base, you could also set a sill profile or rectangular there as well. Openings has a similar kind of setting. If we have openings in our walls, you can set trims to go around them. So we can set them here, or we can press our ellipses and jump down to the full detail. So you could put sills around all of your openings in your walls using this by applying the sill profile. You've got settings there for how you want the sill to look, and also how, what's the word for that, the distance that you want it to go out from the side of the openings. Extension, that's the word. So that's the head trim, jams, same settings again, sill, usual settings again, although there is a brick sill setting, as well as the normal sill profile, and that just adds the options that you can set up how the size that you want of the bricks, and edge offsets if you want the edge trims or the coverings to be offset from the sides of your openings. You can do so here as well. All right, the attributes. This is the same settings page that we had in the other tools. So you've got a bunch of settings for the materials all in one place so that you can easily go and set those after the fact if you like, but these are the same settings that you saw on each individual page. So there's just a good one-stop shop for those. And then the same cut surface settings again. So we've got main covering cut surfaces, covering below sill height cut surfaces, wall top trim, head height trim, blah, 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 all of the cut surfaces you can imagine. And the more different variations you add in your configuration, the bigger this list will get. So it can be a little bit intimidating once you start getting complex, but once you understand what all of the bits do, you should be able to figure your way through pretty easily. They all look the same, they just allow you to be set differently. And we've got similar settings to the roof here as well, where we can set the detail level and where we want the trims to show. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to click OK. And once we do, it zooms out and you can see we've got this drawing a line and it's got a little eyeball cursor. And it just wants us to set what side of the wall we want the covering to be on. So I'm going to click outside the walls. Things away for a second, and you can see we've got some nice coverings going around our walls now. So look good in floor plan, and if I jump into 3D, you can see them there. So we've got our, unfortunately I chose green as the color, but there you are, our nice green bricks and block setting down the bottom, the sill to separate them, and then our board and batten covering above, and you can see that they've trimmed nicely around my openings here, and they fit in beautifully, and you can see that those boards and battens and everything are actually 3D as well, so as soon as we cut a section or anything through those, we're going to see those accurately. Alright, so that's the wall accessory. As you can see, there's a lot to it if you want there to be, but you can also just as easily choose just sort of the default setting and go with that. Alright, the last part of the covering tool, which I'll just briefly look at, is the column coverings, which are just what they sound like. I'll just quickly apply one over here. And they work in pretty much exactly the same way as all the other coverings do. So you select your column, go to the Cadimage menu, coverings, and choose column coverings. And you can see we've got 3 different column coverings here. We've got a column fluting object, which can't really see very well at the moment. There you go. Which lets you apply, obviously, fluting to the column. There's a square column, so it's applying a square fluting covering to it. But if we had a round column, this would be a cylinder shape instead. And you can set sort of the dimensions and spacing and everything of the grooves and the size of the covering and everything there. If you want to choose one of those, there's also settings for where you want it to be offset from the top and the bottom of the column. Column footing object, which is nice and straightforward as well. You can choose rectangular or round footings there, and it just has a couple of settings for the size of it and the materials, obviously. And then a column wrap object, which again is a bit hard to see. So this is essentially to put the bits that you can see here in. So you can see at the top I've got it set to be square, and to have a fillet, but you could set it to be square with a square top, or to have a chamfer or concave or whatever you like, and how you want the bottom to be done as well. Settings for the width and height of each of those shapes are there too, and then you can choose how you want it to wrap as well. So this is just rectangular. It could be a cut rectangle, it could be circular. Well, that looks weird. It could be hexagonal, etc., etc. And once you do choose what shape you want it to be, you've got a setting for the dimension of that there as well. And the location, similar to the column fluting, you can offset it from the top and the base there as well. But those column coverings are just nice and quick and easy. Not a huge amount of settings like the other ones, but they let you do some cool stuff with your columns. All right, so that is the 4 coverings objects that are available in the Cadimage coverings tool. We're just about run out of time, but I'm just going to pause the screen share for a moment and check the questions panel and see if you guys have any questions you want answered. Just a moment. Okay, we've got some questions here about the roof covering, mostly by the look of it. Is it possible to put more than 2 downpipes? Actually, I forgot to show you the downpipes, didn't I? If we pop back into 3D, we can have a look at those quickly. If I just select my roof covering here, it doesn't put downpipes on by default because it doesn't really know where they should go. It wants you to tell it. But you can see here, did I get it? Yeah, there's a little purple hotspot in each corner of the coverings, and as soon as you drag that anywhere besides 0, 0, it will draw a downpipe in. So if I click that one and drag it to there, see it's drawn a downpipe there. Unfortunately, it's shot straight in through the roof, so you can't actually see where it's gone. Let's pull that out a bit. That's a bit better. No, it's not. It's horrible. Anyway. Now, can we do 2 different downpipes on this roof edge? It looks like we can't. I haven't actually tried doing that before, but oh wait, no. Look at that. We can. That's going to be going through the wall again, but you get the idea. Pop that out. There we go. So yeah, you can have 2 different downpipes off the one edge. Oh goodness, sorry, I'd forgotten to reshare the screen. Sorry everyone. As you can see, while you were not able to see what I was doing, if I just undo that last one, you can see this roof edge now does have 2 different downpipes on it. Just going to undo back to there. So there's a purple hotspot in this gutter here, this one here where my cursor is, and if you drag that out anywhere that is not 0, 0, it will draw a downpipe on there. You can see that there, it's popped through the wall, but we can drag it out easily enough. And again, those settings were set back in the covering dialog that we saw earlier.